All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dan Atkinson. I'm very pleased to be here in my role as a board member of the Young Lions Jazz Conservatory. And I want to welcome you all on behalf of the Young Lions and our director, Gilbert Castellanos, to this afternoon's session, a wonderful masterclass with the great guitarist and composer, Anthony Wilson. For those of you who don't know Anthony, you need to know Anthony. He's a Grammy winner, a Monk competition winner, known all over the world for his 9 releases as a leader and for his longtime role in Diana Krall's quartet. So he brings a huge amount of musical knowledge and artistry to this session today. So welcome again to all you folks out there on Zoom. We have some, or YouTube, I should say, and we have some students here who are going to play with Anthony. I also want to give a shout out to Queen Bees and Alma for hosting this session today. We had a venue issue and she stepped into the gap. So thanks so much to her and to the whole team here. So please virtually welcome Anthony.
So I should be looking into the camera that I see in front of me? Okay, great. Well, thank you, Dan, and also to Gilbert Castellanos and to the Young Lions Jazz Conservatory and the few students that are here that are joining me in the space here today to talk about some music and see where it leads us, and to all of you for tuning in. As we were just getting settled, the bass player John and the drummer Jack, they started playing a song that I remember from my youth. So I thought it'd actually be a good song to start with, to kind of get a little bit of conversation going. I'll tell you the story behind my background with this song. When I was my father was a jazz musician. His name was Gerald Wilson, and he was a composer and an arranger and a trumpet player, big band leader. He started his career in 1939 as a trumpet player for the Jimmy Lunsford Orchestra, and he continued working pretty much up until the time he passed in 2014. So, about 70 years of career. And I'm born in 1968. I'm 52 now. And in the 1970s, one of my father's jobs was as musical director for the comedian Red Fox, who was maybe most famous for most people for being Fred Sanford on Sanford and Son. Great comedian. And so my father was his musical director for shows that he did in Las Vegas. And for a very short period, there was this TV variety show that Red Fox had. And so it was a weekly thing. They'd have comedy sketches, and they'd usually have some kind of musical guest. And so one weekend, my father came home with this cassette tape, and he was really excited about it. And it was a cassette tape of a rehearsal for that week's show, and it was a rehearsal of a song, and the musical guest was a guitarist and singer named Glenn Campbell. And so for a lot of you, I'm not sure if this name rings a bell, but he's really a great singer and great guitar player. He came up, sort of built his career playing in the studios in Los Angeles, and he was part of what's known as the Wrecking Crew, playing on huge numbers of albums that were made in the 60s and 70s, but he went on to have an insanely successful career as a vocalist. Almost kind of his excellent guitar playing was like a backseat to his angelic voice, and he recorded the great song by Jimmy Webb called Wichita Lineman, and he recorded a song called Rhinestone Cowboy, which was like a huge song when I was about 7 years old, and that's probably about the time that they did this Red Fox show. And so my dad had this cassette, and he was just really happy with his arrangement, how it had come out, and he played it for me. And so the song was September in the Rain, and it was being sung by Glenn Campbell and Red Fox together with the big band accompaniment. And somewhere I still have the cassette. That was like a moment for me as a young person. It had like a huge impact on me. They sang the song. I didn't know the song. I was listening to, I listened to Bob Dylan, and I listened to the Beatles and Kiss and Aerosmith at about that age. But I loved the sound of jazz because my dad was a jazz musician. I liked it, but this had a thing for me, and they sang the song, and then Glenn Campbell took this guitar solo, and it was the most fluid, beautiful, communicative 8 or 16 bars, and then they went back and they sang, and it was a little shtick, but it was a great arrangement, and it was so swinging, and so John started playing the melody to that song. I don't play that song that often, but so it occurred to me that could be a really good thing for us to play, and for me it's a kind of a testament to the idea that, if you absorb something, if you're able to at a certain point absorb music, if you're interested in playing music, absorbing it from that standpoint rather than a kind of a studied or bookish way, it sticks with you all your life. It was one of those songs that, like, when I arrived in New York after being in college, people would play that song, and I realized, oh, well, I know that song without knowing it, without having studied it. And then, of course, people play the great Tad Dameron song On a Misty Night, which is based on the same changes. So you start to make connections, and I think that maybe more than half of playing music is about that thing, just being kind of having your senses open and absorbing, taking from your environment and finding out what really excites you musically and transports you to a place. So let's play that. We're going to play, and then maybe that opens up some chance to talk a little bit and some questions. So... Yeah. Really nice. Nice to play with. And it's so crazy. Yeah, I mean, it's, I heard that song, it had to be 7 years old. And it's like, I still even remember little things in the big band arrangement. So they'd go, ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-bum. There were these little hits in the trombones, and it was like a hugely formative experience for me to see how something could be put together. And since I liked the singing so much, I learned the words immediately, just because I liked it, The leaves of brown came tumbling down, remember, that September in the rain. The sun went out just like a dying ember, that September in the rain. To every word of love I hear you whisper, the raindrops seem to play a sweet refrain. And I don't remember the last 8. But anyway, it's just, I say all this to just kind of bring that back, bring that back home, that like what gets to you in your heart through your senses and gets to you, it sticks with you. And I think that's so important musically. So you can just dance with that information that you've absorbed. It becomes important as you build your own repertoire, or as you start bands of your own and you start to build your own kind of musical culture. Finding out what's important to you is so important, and driving factor. So it was really, really nice to play with you. You sound great, and listening beautifully, which is the key. Do you guys have any questions? I mean, I'd love to kind of open this up in a sense to discussion, or a little bit of question and answer from going from there and seeing where we end up. So.
Yeah, I do have a question.
Okay.
I was just wondering kind of how you picked up all the voicings that you play, and kind of also figuring out how to place them, in a piece where it's kind of appropriately fits.
Okay. Yeah. So that question is.
Maybe say the question.
Yeah, I'm going to. That question is coming from a guitarist, Jacob, and he's asking how I picked up a lot of the chordal voicings that I play, and then also the idea of how I'm placing things within a performance. Well, I mean, I started, and I probably use at this point still the same process. Start from basics, chords, starting from triads, building to 4-part chords. I learned guitar has this grid-like structure, so there are a lot of things that you can learn via kind of just hand positions and repetition. So you learn what a lot of people call grips or shapes, and that starts you on a road. So that was a big part of my learning, to kind of make sense of things. So taking triads and 4-part chords and learning the inversions and learning to just be able to grab them with some facility, and then learning to kind of change voices within a chord, and start to hear those kind of things myself. Without thinking of them so much as names, so if I was playing, that was just something that really helped me. If I'm thinking in the world of C major here, and I'm not really thinking C major and C major with a sharp 5, or C6 or a C with a flat 5. I'm more thinking what happens when a voice in a pretty standard chord shape that I'm playing, what if one voice changes? That was something I went about, I could just trip out for days on stuff like that, just to see what happened. So, I mean, I could name all these things. Now I'm playing what is taught to many guitarists as a C major 9. But, I was coming off of... So these voices changing within just a basic fixed structure was something that led me to a lot on my own. And then, take the root out. So a lot of times I'm just dealing with major and minor triads there and thinking within a key. So if you played a C, now play an F, and now play an A, and then play a B flat. So there's like, maybe sometimes I'm thinking of chords, but mostly I'm just thinking of how I can move voices within in just a basic form. So that was one thing that I did, and it's very self-directed. Working with major and minor chords, nothing special. You just watch what happens to the chord. A C major 7 turns into a D flat half diminished. Oh, there goes my phone. Let me turn that off. Why is it? To a C sharp half diminished. Goes to really kind of a D sus, or actually E minor 7 in a different inversion. No real chord. Another E minor. So that's something you could do. I would also transcribe things that I heard players that I loved doing. You know, so if it was Wes. Something like that from around midnight on Wes Montgomery Trio. So I just sat with that recording forever and tried to pick up. And then I saw, he was doing these. He basically was using these basic 4-part chord voicings that I had been shown when I was about 13, and their inversions and diminished chords, but major 7th chords, minor 7th chords, dominant 7th chords, minor 6th chords, and diminished chords shaped. So I started working with that, and then because I'm also very into arranging and composing, listening to things like Gil Evans, Duke Ellington, Oliver Nelson, and trying to pick up little voicing things from there. And then it goes on to, and then there's books. I mean, there's tons of books. There's books by Ted Green, which are really great. Johnny Smith had some great method books that mostly coalesce around basic chord inversions. George Van Epps has great method books that are incredible and endless, really. I mean, like, you could get the George Van Epps books and just work with them for the rest of your life, and they give you a complete education, and they're very much around triads. And I don't know, are you familiar with George Van Epps?
No.
George Van Epps was out of the 1930s, swing era guitar player, but he played a 7-string guitar, and he liked to say he played kind of what he called lap piano. And when you listen to George Van Epps, which I heartily recommend, you're just amazed by all the different voices that he can get going and all of the harmony. But when you look at his books, you realize that he wasn't thinking about harmony from like a modern, so-called modern 60s, 70s, later jazz thing. He was thinking about triads mostly and resolutions, how things resolved, and it's still stunningly modern to this day. And there's very few guitar players who have really reckoned with as much as he did. So these people also have been, like Kurt Rosenwinkel, like swears by the George Van Eps books. So just for like as another kind of, to kind of make the parallels between like a modern guitarist who are looking at, there's so much information in those books. So yeah, and then placement usually is, for me, it's about rhythm and register. So, if why don't we just stay on that same tune and just walk a little bit, and I'll try some different things. Often I'm just thinking long and short, in terms of the length of the note, staccato or legato. Am I playing a melodic phrase, or am I playing something that's, if John's playing a solo, my little melodic phrases will tend to be smaller or more micro. But if I were playing for maybe a singer or a piano player, I have more opportunities. But I'll demonstrate a few things that I think about. So yeah, just right on that same 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So sometimes I'm thinking, I'm thinking of a melody. So variety, keep going. That's all big bands. Now maybe the saxophone section comes in. So in that case, I'm thinking syncopated, ba ba da da da, against something flowing, da 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 da, using 2 registers to create some contrast, and then thinking of as fast as I can, thinking of a phrase. A lot of times a small melodic phrase can help me then build how I might place things. So those are some of the things that I work with. And I'd say for guitarists or people who play other instruments where you are accompanying or comping, that sense of play with rhythm and the length of notes that you play and the register, and density is a concept that I think. So if I play, you know, a wide triad like that, or if I play, you know, you know, maybe I start working with that kind of just that idea of that descending line, and that becomes something that gives a little added coherence to what I'm playing. I know that it's, or I think I've come to recognize that one of the things that people who are working with comping and accompanying struggle with or want to make sense of is that, like, making what they play kind of feel like it has context, and you're doing it on the fly. You're doing it right now. It's not something that you planned out. I mean, if you sit down with a singer or another musician and they call a tune, how do you keep it from being random, you know? So, like, all of these things, you know, learning to kind of break out even just of the things that you have learned already, try to activate those and see what can become of them. So that thing of, like, finding what happens when you move voices in a chord, or finding what happens when you do different registers, you know, I mean, so it really helps to know, you know, that I've got E flat major 7, all of these places, you know. That's a big part of the battle, and that just sort of comes, you know, that came slowly to me, and I think it does for a lot of people. It just came over time to be able to kind of build the visualization of, then you begin to connect it with scales, so then you're able to live within keys. It's a result of a long process of starting to visualize. Guitar has its own thing. You know, piano is different because all the notes are in one line. Stringed instruments, they're tuned differently. So if you're on a violin, or if you're on a bass or a guitar, you know, you have these different. Is the instrument tuned in fifths? Is it tuned in fourths? Do you have this pesky third in the middle of, you know, of all fourths, which is a real drag because you can't, you know, so I practiced a lot of just, like, being able to practice to play phrases all in fourths, so that when I wanted fourths in my world, I wasn't tripped up by the fact that there was this built-in third in the way the guitar is tuned. So anyway, this is a long digression, and don't want to get too guitaristic about it, because I know there's probably other people who play many other things. But if that's I would just encourage, you know, those working with the basics that you already have in terms of voicings, building upon those, taking the root away, you know. So think about thirds later on. Think about thirds and sevenths and ninths and sixths. Those tend to open up the chord, and that can make them take many more root notes than just the one that you thought it had. So ear training, practice listening to different roots against those notes, and then putting them together, you know, thinking about melodic phrases, and always putting them into songs that you like, that you can relate to, and because that hits you in that good place that's self-directing, you know. It's, I mean, I could keep talking about this all day. So, are there other questions coming up? Anybody in the chat? Or
I don't have any questions in the chat. I asked
but there's people here, so.
So this is kind of connected to what you've been talking about, but do you have any strategies for bringing in new language that you hear, especially like linear ideas?
Sure. I mean, I guess. Oh, so the question that's coming from over here is about strategies for incorporating new types of linear melodic language into one's playing. I'd say that these days, because mostly what I work on has to do with kind of getting as close to hearing and executing what I'm hearing. I don't do it as much as I think I used to, but the main strategy was transcribing and learning other people's solos and compositions. I think that's also a really good. Those two things. If there's a musician that you like, that's a really great improviser and a really great composer, looking at those two things hand in hand, because a lot of times the person is working out ideas in both realms, and then they start to feed off of each other. So, the way chords move or type of chords and the way of moving through those. So for me, it's always just been learning people's solos, learning people's tunes, and then trying to figure, and then learning to play them. Obviously, I mean, for me, I was never a huge fan of writing down solos. I would learn them to be able to play them because I wanted to know what it felt like to make those moves that didn't come naturally to me. Oh, wow. This person figured that out? Oh, my God. So then, okay. And then usually distilling down, especially phrases that really speak to me and ways of moving through harmony. And then I just practice them in different keys. And then sometimes as a composer, writing, use those, okay, this person has a certain way of rendering intervals in a way that I've never quite gotten to myself. So now let me try to work on my own tunes coming from there. That's something just got in my eye. Another light. It's like when you.
Would you rather be in front?
Well, it's that light is kind of in my eye. So that, for me, that would be the strategy, a bit of analysis. And then a lot of times what I find is that's very interesting, especially when you find say players of today that are working on a certain thing, and then when you find out, maybe you're listening to something and you realize, something from even 20 years before, they were getting that from here, so always looking for those kind of those parallels and those connections. One thing that I love to emulate is a certain kind of legato style that I hear in early saxophonists, relatively early saxophonists, people like Don Byas, or then moving on to Paul Gonsalves with Duke Ellington. So there's a certain kind of freewheeling legato way of moving through registers that is not always so easy on the guitar, and so you're looking for those connections. These players through so you might hear Don Byas, Lester Young, Paul Gonsalves, Warren Marsh, and so then you have, that sort of opens up the, Warren Marsh, Mark Turner, and you start finding these connections and parallels. That's what starts to really excite me, So if that's one thing. Just work with people's solos, I think, as much as you can, and they become like old friends, and you come back to them, and you hear new things in them, and then they become part of your language, and you build on them. So, for me, that's the way it was with with Wes Montgomery, Jim Hall, Bill Frisell, who I like very much. Listening to these guys for those pieces of things that felt like, oh, I can personalize this because I feel connected to it. So,
Just adding on that, like, there's so many solos out there,
Yeah.
And it's like, you get distracted, because like all like transcribe work solo, and then it's like, I'll learn half of it, and then I'm like, and
Yeah.
so how do you stay, like, how do you approach like choosing what exactly you're going to work on now?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't. I don't think it's particular. We live in an attention deficit world,
Right.
and there's so much information just constantly coming at us. So, to me, I wouldn't put too much judgment on learning 8 bars of something before my attention shifts to something else and learning. It's not like there's no syllabus here. You know what I mean? There's no like course requirement that in the course of your life you will have like completed. You know what I mean? So it's you. In other words, you have free reign. So sometimes it's somebody's phrases, or sometimes it's something in this voicing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with learning a 4-bar passage and then finding out how that passage is relevant to you. Maybe it informs a composition later. Maybe it becomes like a really major part of the way you play. Maybe it unlocks something about the way certain chords move. So that 4 bars can generate so much. So I just prioritize where my interest stays, the kind of the hottest, and the most engaged. And if so much of what I do is centered around compositional practice. So if I'm, so a lot of what I write then finds its way into my guitar playing. A lot of times I'm writing away from the guitar, or I'm writing at the piano. So I might have heard a song by Randy Newman, for example, and I just love this certain motion in the counterpoint, and the way that he's using suspended tones to create tensions between chords, and then how he jumps off and finally resolves, and then introduces a new tension. So that becomes, say, the concept that I start working with, and then it allows me to go into my playing. Maybe I start writing songs with that, or a song based on that, and that becomes something that I have to kind of learn then to work with playing-wise, and that can last for a long time. So, no, just pretty much following where you stay the most engaged, because that's the most fruitful place, that's those are like little keys and clues to your musical personality, so the thing that keeps tugging at you, or makes you linger, or you keep going back and listening to it. I mean, if anything would be telling you to settle down and really work with this rather than those other things that you've been checking out or everybody's checking out. That would be the thing. That's like that, oh, there's something about this. I keep going back and listening to this tune, or this tune really confuses me, but I keep coming back to. That's, I think, where a lot of the answers are for your own practice, to show you where the point is to kind of get beyond and out of the realm of all the influences that we collect, and then kind of enter our own kind of musical terrain and create from there. So, yeah.
Anthony, I got a question.
Okay.
Could you maybe talk about, I feel like nowadays, especially with the internet, it's so easy to find, scale syllabuses, music notation. It's so easy to find all these written things. But can you talk about maybe when I'm trying to teach some of my students how to really develop a relationship with like the sounds and the movements of chords and number sequences of like 2-5-1s, but to really understand what that feels like, especially when you're hearing it in certain ways, just of how to develop your ear,
Sure.
Rather than really trying to, like write everything down or really trying to read books to figure out all the questions. Because I try and explain to some of my students, the real books haven't been around forever, obviously. So how do you approach learning stuff by ear and really creating that relationship with the music, like trying to find the sound and what it means to hear them?
Gotcha. And they heard that question because you had the mic. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, everything or a huge amount of what we want to be able to do, I think, as musicians, we can find in books. I mean, for sure. Whether they're theory books, they're books that show you, exactly how to play a certain passage. There's transcription books. There are, obviously there's scores. If you're into classical music, you can go straight to musical scores and look, and so, and pick these things up, and they're in print. Things are in print, and I think that there's great validity, and actually I think, and one of the things that I'm most impressed by with young musicians I've been meeting over the last couple of decades since the internet, and now, because it's just so profuse, with information, is just the amount of information you all have. I mean, honestly, I feel often a great deal of envy, because I wonder what I might have been doing with the same information in 1986 or 88. I mean, I went to the library a lot, and I was in college from 86 to 90. I went to the listening library. I made dubs of, it was insane, So there was still a process of gathering, but how you had to kind of winnow down to find things was so different. The process of it was so different, and it wasn't like literally lightning fast. If I'm chatting with a few friends right now on Zoom or FaceTime, and somebody says, "Well, listen to this, check this out. This was just recorded," like it's so blazingly fast, and there's so much amazing information. Which is what you've said. I'm not saying anything different than what you've said. So, but I guess there is that sense of kind of paring away and slowing down. I mean, I would say maybe the thing just is to slow. There's another step. So there's that step, which is an awesome step, because you can just Like basically right now with your computer, you can enter the largest library on your, because you have access to everything on the planet. So there's that. And so we could throw out a million references tonight of different players that we love, and certain solos, certain recordings, certain rare recordings, certain bootlegs, certain videos. Okay, so now I've been getting into, for example, Johnny Griffin. Okay, so there's this, and there's Johnny Griffin with Monk, and there's now, where do I want to go with it? Okay, how is he, Johnny Griffin, the way he just trots through changes like it's nothing, and the way he just eats them for lunch. Okay, so that's the concept that I now want to work with. Well, now I have to really slow it down. I just feel like, and I just have to limit myself, and start getting in the mud with it a little bit, because obviously I'm not playing. So maybe I can learn a bunch of Johnny Griffin solos, or maybe I'm reading the transcriptions. I can learn them and I can play them and I get them under my fingers. Great. Okay. Now there's this other step, is that we want to, there's something that's not contained in what I'm telling you about Johnny Griffin. Okay, he trots through changes like nobody's business, in some ways better than anybody. Johnny Griffin could just keep playing changes and keep you interested forever. Why does he keep you interested? It's not the intervals. It's not actually only the way that he plays the changes. It's not only the vocabulary, although it's not only the tone. It's not only the rhythmic facility. It's all of these things together, and his, maybe more than anything else, his ability to tell a story with all of that. His ability to kind of paint, like, okay, so you can learn, okay, I know exactly what Johnny Griffin does and how he gets through this, and it's insane. Stop, slow down. Okay, here's this line. Wow. There's something I missed totally. Something about the contour of the line, or the pacing of the line, or the way he deals with registers. I think about that a lot. And so then there's something, again, to dig into that's not just the things that are the building blocks there. And so, the same thing with theory, harmonic movement, studying, I'm just going to mention him again because I love him, and a lot of young people don't listen to Randy Newman, but Randy Newman is a great, 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 great composer, and I love these moves that he makes. But then there's something else in his songs that just has to, that's like ineffable. It's almost impossible to articulate. And I think usually somebody that, if we're dealing with these building blocks, intervals, theory, chord relationships, resolutions, rhythm, arpeggiation, scales, all of these things to build this thing, then there's this other step back. Okay, how do I want to use it? And I say it remains just an open-ended question. There's no real answers to that, except to take that step back and realize that there's another step, or there's something else contained in this. Mahler, also use of suspensions, the incredible drama of harmonic juxtaposition and suspension. So I'm going to go and I'm going to get into that, and I'm going to study those scores, and I'm going to listen, study those scores. But then what is it about that one chord progression or one change that literally my thought cannot even contain it? you know? And so I would just say maybe to your students and to you, never, always keep sight that there is that element that really is the magnet, I think. You know, I'm sure everybody in this room and everybody listening has those things musically that they bypass anything that's cognitive and go to another place, and that's the place to pay attention to. So when I'm listening to Johnny Griffin, it's actually this other thing, this joy, this exuberance, this human kind of warriorship, just, you know, like taking charge. You know, there's a spirit that the work entailed to do it was in service of that thing. So every Johnny Griffin solo is like a triumph. You know, it's like a great, you know, like a great tennis player. You know, it's Nadal. You know what I mean? It's like that kind of, what is that thing? What is that mastery? And so we work with these building blocks to get to that, I think, you know, if that makes sense, never losing sight of that.
That's great.
Yeah.
There was a chat or a question on the chat. Someone had a question. It's just about like what do you practice? Like what do you do every day? Just to warm up, or just it's kind of about your practice routine.
Yeah, I have like one thing that I learned from Kenny Burrell that I love is he said to me, you know, it's always great, and he would tell all students this. I taught alongside him at UCLA for a number of years, so I got to know him very well, and so he says, well, you know, when you pick up the instrument cold, play something that you feel comfortable with. Play something right away that enables you to like really settle and feel good while you're playing. You know, because you're coming at the instrument cold. So I do that. There's a few of my own songs that I really like to play. They're often songs that require certain technical things of me, so they have that added little piece of just getting me to feel like, oh, okay, I'm moving well here, and my right hand is moving well. So starting off, practicing those kind of things, or if I just want to practice mechanics, things like simple scales, simple arpeggios, and simple chord inversions, it just puts me in tune with the guitar. I'm visualizing things. And from there, you know, sometimes it might be I'm practicing toward a gig, something that's coming up, so there's music to learn. You know, there's melodies to learn, or somebody, you know, somebody's given me some music with some really difficult changes, and so there's that. That can be an aspect. Often I'm working on my own songs, kind of thinking about parts that I want to play on my own compositions. Sometimes it's a writing-based kind of practice, so I'm working on writing something on the guitar, so that becomes my practice. I mean, because I can write for a long time, so I could be sitting playing all day off and on that way, you know, half an hour here, stand up, take a break, come back, sit for an hour, jotting down things, trying to get that section, make it happen. So for me, that's really good practice. Maybe then I'm thinking about improvising around that same song, so I'm doing a bit of that. So for me, it's a kind of multifaceted. But I think for everybody, it's different. The main thing I think is that sense of getting warmed up and feeling like you're settled and you're present with the instrument. You're showing up to be there, because if you're going through the motions, or you're not really engaged, or you're not really showing up, then you don't get a lot out of it. So that way 20 minutes might be what you needed that day. It's not like you needed 6 hours. Maybe you needed, and that was a big George Van Epps, one of his tips in his book is never practice, something like for every 20 minutes that you practice, always take a 10-minute break. And like, I thought that was crazy, because like when I read that, like I was still in my like time of just like, I would not stop playing, I would just play hours and hours and hours and like not eat. And he was like, you've got to take a break, but like now I totally get it, because you play for a while and you're working on something, the bridge of a certain song, just to get that under your fingers and make it sound right, make it happen, be able to, 20 minutes doing that, you can then step away from it and kind of absorb it, and then come back, or maybe then you play it that night on a gig, when gigs come back. And whoa, that 20 minutes really helped, just thinking about it and getting off of it and allowing it to kind of go into your subconscious rather than, yeah. Okay.
Well, I don't mean to disrespect. I don't know how much time we have, but can you please play some more? Please, I would just really love to hear you play more.
Yeah, I'll play some more. I'll play something else. No disrespect, but play, please. Stop talking. Oh, let's play this song. You probably don't know it, but this is a Hank Williams song, and lots of jazz musicians put a lot more chords to it than it has. So this is I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry by Hank Williams. And I like to play it kind of like this, but this is his chords. So it's in E. Yeah, you guys. Yeah. And I mean, I love that song, Hank Williams. It's just, you don't need to go. You don't have to go through all those motions. I'll hear people that say, we're going to play I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry, and then they take all of the lonesome out of it. It's no, there's not one lonesome chord in it because they got 9 chords beside it. Anyway, but so yeah, so really lovely. I don't know if we're about at the time, but if there's yeah, so to you guys, thank you so much for joining me. Playing is great to play with you and effortless. So, you know, that's the thing, you know. Meet and show up in the music, and the rest takes care of itself, I think, too. Just going back to the questions that came from over in this direction, just it's like all of those things that we're trying to put together, and there's so many of them. Those are there, and they're always at your work table, and you're chipping away at them, and then, okay, let's meet and show up in the music, you know. And that, for me, that's that's like a principle that you can just always keep with you. So thank you very much. Thank you guys. Thank you. Thanks, Gilbert. Thanks for setting this up, Gilbert. Awesome. Nice. That was fun.